All right, everybody, let's go ahead and get started. So once again, my name is Kevin Hancock, Director of Solutions here at Exostar, and thanks for joining me today for turning supplier data into actionable insights. Today's session is scheduled to last 30 minutes. It does include Q&A, so what I'll be doing is at the end of today's session, I'll just go ahead and take a look at the chat and see if anybody submitted any questions via that manner. If for some reason we do have an outage today, just wait for a minute and try to reconnect. You can do that a couple of different ways. You can either just refresh your screen, or you can go into the email you received for today's session and click on that link again, and that should bring you back into today's session. If at any time you'd like to speak with one of our supply chain experts, or if you have additional questions, you can reach out to us also a couple of different ways. You can email us, supplychain@exostar.com, or you can come to our website, www.exostar.com. There's a form there on every page you can fill out, and we'll reach out to you as soon as we can to answer those questions. Now, today's session, we're going to talk about the supply chain and how to validate that your suppliers are compliant with your requirements, how to get that information and act upon it based on the information you receive from them. Now, this obviously helps in not allowing supply chain disruptions to occur based on compliance requirements you may have because you're in a particular industry. And obviously in the aerospace and defense space, we have quite a few compliance requirements that we need to ensure that work across the supply chain, or get the reps and certifications of our supply chain to understand where they fit, what kind of business we can do with them, and whether or not we just want to continue this relationship. This typically falls under some kind of supplier onboarding. So what kind of information do we need to gather? What kind of information do we have to validate before we'll do business with a particular organization? Now, for many organizations in the aerospace and defense industry, Exostar does a number of those things around supplier onboarding and identity management for both the organization and the individuals from those organizations that you want to work with. We provide a number of solutions in that space. I'm going to cover one of those in particular today called supplier management, where I'll also dive into the application itself and show you. But this is all about getting that secure access to the information you want to provide to your suppliers, ensuring that they have the right reps and certs to work with you, and the right credentials to interact with your systems. Much of this collaboration is around the purchase order and order to cash flow. And obviously, since this is an aerospace and defense focused webinar, much of this is around cybersecurity compliance and the requirements really that have just come online around CMMC. Now, with the defense industry, because we're in this space and because we have contracts with the Department of Defense, or our contracts are with those who have them, when we've signed subcontracts with those entities, we've agreed to particular contract flowdowns that have particular requirements around how we secure information, both just the contract information itself, that's the FCI, federal contract information that we may receive, or what's called CUI, controlled unclassified information. There's certain ways or certain requirements we have to have in place to protect that information. Those are based on a number of NIST standards. NIST 800-171 in particular is what governs the protection of controlled unclassified information in non-federal systems. These have a number of clauses. Defense Federal Acquisition Regulations, those are those DFARS clauses, the 7020 and the new 7021, which flow down to you if you're a subcontractor in this space. Now, the CMMC ruling is fairly new, though we've been talking about it for a number of years. This ruling went into effect this month on 11/10 of 2026. Now, this ruling requires that if you receive controlled unclassified information as part of a contract, you agree that you protect it in accordance with NIST 800-171. It also says that if you only receive federal contract information, then you have to protect that information in accordance with 15 requirements that are laid out in a FARS clause that has those 15 requirements laid out. Now, CMMC has changed the program a little bit in that we've moved away from organizations just attesting themselves that they do this, scoring themselves and entering that score into the supplier performance risk system. Now, if you are at that CMMC level 2, which means you receive controlled unclassified information and you've agreed that you're going to protect it in accordance with NIST 800-171, that once every 3 years, you have a third party come out and assess that you're actually doing those controls and validates that you've got the evidence that you've implemented those, that you've trained your organization in doing those policies and procedures that you have in place. And then they enter your information into the EMAS system and you get that CMMC level 2 certification. And then you can continue to bid on contracts that have that particular requirement. Now, the 48 CFR, the Code of Federal Regulations that implemented CMMC, also laid out particular requirements when it comes to your subcontractors that you want to engage with. The requirements that you need to know that they are also compliant with CMMC, how to go about vetting those organizations and the information you're going to need to gather that they have. And that's one of those things we're going to use as an illustration during today's session to say, hey, if you've got this requirement and you need to vet your supply chain, here's a way to do it. Exostar can help you. Now, what this puts in place is that you need to develop a plan for managing those supply chain risks. You need a method or a process and a procedure to gather that necessary information from your supply chain. Are you compliant? What's your compliance status? Let me, prove to me, if you will, that you are. Let me see that certification or your score in the SPRS system. Maybe you need additional information around conflict minerals. Maybe you need some additional information around tax IDs and things like that as well. So what are your requirements for the different classifications of suppliers that you utilize? Do you have a method to gather that information? Maybe it's by email, maybe it's a manual process today, and that's okay. But oftentimes those kinds of processes fail to scale and will limit the kind of business you can do, or obviously the number of partners you can engage at any one time. And then that's going to obviously limit your ability to mitigate that risk across a number of different suppliers. That plan should be protected as CUI itself, but should be known across your organization and obviously implemented across your supply chain. Now, the reason Exostar knows about these requirements and can help you in solving these problems is because we've been doing this for quite a few years, and we've been doing this with the primes for a number of years. Exostar was founded approximately 25 years ago in 2000 as a shared services company for the large aerospace and defense firms. We focused on the supply chain collaboration and the ability of those organizations to offer out a one or more various platforms to collaborate with their supply chain. And one of those requirements is to gather the necessary information that they need to do business with their nth tier supply chain. And as part of that, we've been gathering that information, those reps and certs across that Exostar network. That Exostar network has grown throughout the years and includes a number of organizations today, right? We have 52,000 organizations in the Exostar A&D network. That equates to about 215,000 individual users, with obviously millions of transactions occurring throughout the year. Now, these organizations and individual users go through a base vetting process once they've been invited into the Exostar network. Exostar ensures that those individual organizations are not on a denied parties list. We also maintain that constantly. So we're constantly checking those lists, checking the network, ensuring that those organizations stay compliant with that kind of baseline requirement. We also vet individual users that you're going to provide access to your applications. And in most of these cases, it's those PO collaboration applications where you're doing that direct collaboration around transactions with your supply chain. But in order to give them access, they're going to obviously join their individuals to your applications. You're going to say whether or not that's okay, but those individuals are going to go through a vetting process with Exostar as well. This is going to be based on your requirements in the aerospace and defense industry and what kind of requirements you want to enforce around the credentialing of those end users. Do you want them to have a particular kind of credential? You obviously want it to be a multi-factor authentication, but do you also want it to be a phishing resistant token? Do you want it to be a hardware or software token? Do you have particular requirements around the individuals themselves who are coming in, because maybe you're sharing some ITAR information, so you want to know if these are US persons, US citizens, etc., because that affects the kind of relationship you want to have with them. So that kind of provides that base layer of identity and access proofing that Exostar does before it lets these folks collaborate with you. Then once you bring them into the Exostar platform, using the Exostar supplier management module, you can gather additional information from that supply chain. And this is where you would build out those forms, or you would use the Exostar provided forms. In this Exostar application, we have a number of standard forms that are available. They're focused on the aerospace and defense industry. So these are things like a cybersecurity risk assessment form, a CCRA form. There's one that's just wrapped around NIST 800-171. There's a conflict minerals form. There's a basic intake form to gather that base information you need, names, addresses, tax IDs, those kinds of things to do business with that organization as well. Now, the benefit to the suppliers themselves is that because they're part of the Exostar network, they can share the information that they've provided to one contractor with others. So if they've provided their information, say, for example, to HII, and your company is also leveraging Exostar supplier management, when you reach out to that partner, the forms that they have already filled out are going to come pre-populated to them. They're going to just have to verify that those things are still in effect. Their scores haven't changed, their reps haven't changed, etc. And then they can revalidate that and send that back to you. If during that time another person starts to utilize supplier management or another organization does, they send out that form to that organization that they want to partner with, and something has changed on that form, you, as a subscriber to supplier management, would get those updates to that company, and you know whether or not they're still compliant or if they've fallen out. Now, obviously, you can create custom forms as well in this, because though we have those standard forms, we also recognize that there are times where you're going to want to gather particular custom information from your supply chain as well. And all of that's done within the supplier management module of the Exostar platform. That base layer, many of you know today, that secure access and master data, that is Exostar's managed access gateway. Many of you are using that today, or you have credentials into that system, and that's where you're going to get, access to those supply chain portals, the like of GE Aerospace, Boeing, RTX, etc. You may also be using those systems to gain access to a managed Microsoft 365 environment that's sponsored by one of the folks you collaborate with. That also is an Exostar application. But then many of you may also be using this to, say, collaborate with Lockheed Martin on applications that they themselves are hosting. Because Exostar is, again, providing that front door and that base access permissioning into those applications, providing that trust relationship between the aerospace community and the organizations that want to work together. Now, as I mentioned, the supplier management solution, which I'm going to dive into in just a minute, is an application that sits on top of a shared data model, which allows you to share that information that's been provided to other organizations. Because that information is already there, they approve it once you send the forms to them. This is that connect once, certify once pillar, if you will, of this solution. This means that they can leverage that information with others, so they don't have to keep filling out the same form every time, and the suppliers don't waste their time in getting a new, if you will, certification or having to go through this process. This reduces that onboarding time of new suppliers. It also cuts out on those manual processes where you may have, and those manual spreadsheets where you might have to say, hey, this is an accreditation or an authorization that we have to make sure is renewed every year. We have to validate it, because the system itself will send out those reminders. It lets you know when things are starting to expire, allows you to proactively send out those communications with your supply chain. And then obviously, if you want to work with others or you want to integrate this into other systems in your company, there are APIs that we can use to do that ERP integration and scale it, obviously, to other applications and other users as well. So let me dive in and actually show you how this works. So I've got the application here. So as you can see, this is the supplier management application. In here, we're getting a quick dashboard of those suppliers that are compliant, non-compliant, which ones we've onboarded, which ones we offboarded, how long does it take to get onboarded to the solution, where are we in the kind of the status flow of particular forms. Now, obviously, I may just want to check on a particular status of a supplier. Obviously, CMMC is relevant right now, and so maybe we want to check on a particular supplier's status around their NIST 800-171. So Exostar has a default form for that. You can send that out to your suppliers, and you get their SPUR score submitted to you. This tells you how many of those controls they have in place. You would, because this is only a score of 33, you would know that they're not yet CMMC certified, because this would be a 110, and you'd want them to provide you some proof that they actually have that third-party assessment as well. But this at least tells you that they're working on it, and they've done that self-assessment, and they know where they stand. Now, you could also take a look, from the dashboard view, if you will, again, of something that might be expiring soon. So, we've got here that this CCRA, that's that cybersecurity risk form, has expired. We can then prompt this supplier to update that, right? Though the supplier was getting those emails, right? The system itself is sending emails. Obviously, they didn't take action. Maybe I'm responsible for this particular supplier, so I want to send this supplier an email. I choose which of the users from this organization I want to send to. We're going to let people know that we emailed this. We're going to send this form, and then we're going to update the status of that particular communication. So we know that we've emailed that organization to, if you will, update that form. And then we could do that with any of those that are responsible for us. Now, if I want to invite individual organizations to work with me, I can invite them individually. So I could search the Exostar network to see if there's a supplier named Acme that is the one I want to onboard. This shows me all the current companies with Acme in their name. I choose the one I want to work with, and then I initiate the process of sending this information or inviting this existing supplier to work with me. What we often find is this typically isn't a one, you don't do this typically one at a time. Maybe you've got a number of different organizations that you want to start to work with. Maybe you do these in batches once a week, and you've got 5, 10, 15 of these. Maybe you're onboarding a whole new swath of folks, etc. So in those cases, we have the campaign option. So you can start a new campaign. And to do that, you simply click on it, you name it, choose the type of campaign. Is it an individual or an organization? You download the template of the campaign itself. You'll fill out that CSV file, you'll upload it, and then you would start to send out that form. Once you send out those campaigns, you'll see that they've got a number of different organizations, and you may have to resolve some issues in that form, right? And these issues are typically that either they've found an organization. So in this case, we uploaded Semiconductor Components Industries. The system has gone through and matched this company with anything that might be like it, because in this case, obviously these names aren't the same, but they are in the same city. They have the same postal code. So maybe they were changed names or etc. Excuse me. But you get to determine whether or not this is actually new, or if instead it's one of these organizations. So in this case, we'd resolve it. We'd choose that one, and we would choose this as a new organization. And we do this with any of those that return to us. And as you saw, we got a confidence level with these on whether or not we think this is new, or the confidence level of these particular ones that we're trying to resolve. Now, when we started this campaign, we're typically attaching the forms that we want them to fill out, and we're finding the feedback of how they're going about doing that. So if I look in the form requests dashboard, I'm going to see all the pending forms that we have out there. And as people fill out these forms, I'm going to get feedback on them, right? They were sent out at a particular time. They were given a due date of when those were done, of when those need to be done. And I'm going to see the progress of that particular supplier through these. Just as the system sends emails to remind people to renew things, it's also going to send emails to remind people they have things due. And again, we're going to keep prompting them until they've done it, or you can manually intervene to move these along. And then once they go through, they come through an approval process. So as I sent them out, I designated individuals on my side that had to approve that kind of form. And then they go through that particular process, and then forms can be completed, and then they can get granted access to things on my side that are okay with their current status as that kind of supplier. So all of that type of functionality, oops, and I did it again, is built into the supplier management platform. Sorry, I keep hitting Exostar, and that just takes me to the Exostar homepage. And then, obviously the dashboards and things like that would update. Now, even though Exostar has those canned forms, if you will, we also do allow you, under the Form Lifecycle Manager, to create new forms, or you can clone existing forms and create new ones that meet your particular needs. This is where you can, as I mentioned, customize existing forms. You can clone existing forms and add in additional data. You can put in the expiration date, when these things need to be renewed, all that kind of thing, to create those workflows and those rules around how you want those overall managed. So hopefully that gave you a pretty good idea of how this can help you in maintaining the compliance of your supply chain, and leverage that Exostar network to ease the onboarding process. Allow your suppliers to leverage the data they may have already provided to others, so they don't have to go from scratch every time they start to work with somebody new. Now, Exostar has a number of other supply chain solutions. These are those supply chain portals where you go to work with the larger primes out there. So if you're a prime contractor and you subcontract to a number of organizations, and you want to provide a centralized portal to do PO collaboration, understand and push down the demand signal changes to your supply chain, Exostar has a solution around that called Supply Line. If you're a supplier to a number of different large primes out there, and you're utilizing those different supply chain portals, and today you have a large manual process of updating PO acknowledgement, ASN generation, etc. Exostar is a solution that can help you there as well. That's our demand line solution. That works on the demand side. So it's going to go out to all those supply chain portals periodically, and you set that schedule. It's going to bring down the changes to POs, the new orders and things like that you may have received, and can populate those directly into your ERP. So that takes us to the end. I want to thank you all for your time and attention. I'm going to stop sharing, just take a quick look to see if anybody had any questions. Well, I don't see any. So again, I want to thank everybody for your time and attention today. Hopefully this allowed you to understand how you can work better with your supply chain, be proactive in that information gathering. Thanks so much and have a great day.